Sign it up there,
Oh,
but it's always nice just to have a copy. Yeah.
Yeah, because you can't, you wouldn't like it if you go up there and scribble on the screen.
Yeah, it's hard to do that.
It's hard to scribble on the screen.
Yeah,
You have a lot of marks and
That's
they
an
all get
expensive
confused.
screen.
to be in the know, I'm guessing.
Don't bet on
Okay, you're on camera.
So
Oh, it's on.
we are live.
You have a copy of the master plan. Would you like a copy of the master plan too, or have it on your
it.
laptop?
Got really fancy and have it on here.
No, that's cool too. I have a couple extra.
I have it up
copies
here as
in case
well.
Anybody forgets and needs to review.
I would take one just a reference while we're in here,
Um,
or is that just for?
Well, let me make sure that I have enough for
Right on.
whoever shows up. But if I have any extra, you
Right
can
on.
review. It is on our website though as well.
Right,
So
but, you know,
We'll get to these up.
if you're 6 feet apart or whatnot, then you can.
it's a different plan than the city of Harbor Springs Marina Park master plan, right?
Yeah.
There
Is that-
are quite a
yes.
few
I've got
things.
a copy of the 5-year recreation plan.
That's the Marina
Yes.
Park rec.
That's a
So
separate.
the rec, there's a rec plan, there's a downtown development plan, there's a couple other plans. The master plan is kind of a general plan for the whole city. And then I believe any of those other plans would be sub-plans underneath this. And I know that when we have those plans that are done, like the downtown development plan was done in 2012.
He and Jeff.
When, in 2014, when we read the master plan, we adopted some of those downtown development plans into the master plan, so.
Right.
But I mean, I read this like 4 times.
So
about-
no one else is on the phone? Mary, who else?
So I really did feel-
Jeffrey Ford, Mary Catherine,
I tried. And then I still felt like John Cox,
John Cups,
Jeff,
Jeff Ford,
Jeff Ford, and you got
Lee Kramer,
Jack Deegan.
Jack Deegan.
Hey,
I
John.
have no idea.
Yeah, all that I'm gonna throw in everything else is.
I felt so bad that year I left me a message at my desk phone.
I will send that to the mayor.
2 months about.
Mark
"Want to be
Bidet.
back on? Do you not want to be back
It
on?
comes once in a while.
Depends on the
Another
agenda.
thing that we can talk about.
Land commission, no, not really.
No?
No.
There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for a few more people. Thanks for joining us.
Quite frequently.
We need 5, so we have 3.
Mary Catherine.
Yeah, we need.
One on the website, just to look for master plan.
Is there a live feed of this
I'm on there.
also?
Are we live on YouTube yet?
Yeah, we are live on YouTube.
Okay. So you-
Yes, YouTube is live.
Yeah. I got it today. I'm in my desk in weeks. So I just did everything.
Because I'm on the City of Harbor Springs YouTube channel and I'm not seeing it, but,
You may have to
oh,
refresh.
no, there we go. No, that's the,
There's always a delay.
the DBA meeting, but I don't see today's meeting. Okay.
Larry, did you ride your bicycle?
I did not. I drove up in a car today.
I mean, it's on the screen.
Beautiful
It's,
day like this, I'm
You guys
surprised.
in hot? It's been midday.
It says you're live.
I wonder if am I
Or
pub,
can you do both? I thought
Well,
you
didn't
had
you know that the internet lies?
that or YouTube?
Well, if you have this, if you have the sound on YouTube and your speaker on your phone going, then you get a little bit
Oh,
of
I
feedback.
got
So you can do both, and I do
Isn't
think
that
that the
crazy?
sound on the YouTube is better than
Right.
the sound
Yeah,
of the phone.
maybe a third, maybe.
So what I did for city council is I was
Not ever
listening
true
to the
because
YouTube,
Majority of it is
and then
opinion.
when I needed to speak or say something,
Yeah,
I
So we got-
why
muted
say
my
that?
phone.
That would be-
we got 3 people now on YouTube.
This is an
Correct.
opinion.
There is, so they said,
We all
Jeff, do you have
have a right to our
anything to add?
opinion.
And then there's like about a 10
Say
second
it like
pause
it's a law.
where you finally
Speak now or forever.
You're like the newscaster that doesn't realize he's on the air.
Yeah. Is this one where we need a form like? Oh, yeah.
We need 5.
5. Yeah, no, especially.
So we got Jeff on YouTube, Mary Catherine, Andy, who's calling in now. We might have the 5th. Just heard a ding.
Is there a secret password or a
160 ST.
And then-
160 Zoll ST.
And which, I've got City of Harbor Springs 24, City of Harbor Springs 50.
Either one.
What is it?
160
Jeff Ford is on
Zoll.
them.
ZOLL
Jeff Ford is on,
ST2. Don't tell anybody it's secret.
Mary Catherine is on the phone, and then someone else joined us on the phone,
ZOL.
but I'm not sure who.
For the street.
Yeah.
John Leo is on the line.
Hi, John, how are you? John, we're giving people a few more minutes here to, for members to join us. Make sure we have a quorum.
Is the YouTube channel live?
Yeah, Jeff Ford is participating by YouTube, but there's only, yep, it's live.
I'm not seeing it.
Is that up? Oh, you can turn that
You
down.
may need to refresh the page. If you hit F5,
I may have jumped in the shower. I didn't think anybody besides us could be here.
I have been refreshing it, but that's fine, go ahead.
Here you are. If you're in doors open, I'm thinking somebody's coming in, but I don't
There's
know.
no, yeah.
Maybe they're reading instructions.
well, Thursdays.
What's up with that?
No, it says,
Live now.
Yeah.
Watching. Did you break it?
it did the same thing at the DDA meeting this morning. It's just not working, so.
Is Jeff able to log in though from?
Yeah, Jeff is on YouTube. He's right there, yeah. So we're still just at 4. Call John Cush really quick.
Text you?
Is that senior?
Junior.
Junior.
So senior isn't on any commissions now?
No, when he retired from council.
Oh.
Call Lee Kramer as well.
Looks like there's a 4th person that got onto YouTube. We'll see if it's a. I know. It's
Everything is backwards on the screen.
on the screen, and
Oh, you
then
mean the video feed?
You held up a word, something written, it would be backwards. It reverses. Unplug the camera and turn the keyboard. Great.
John Cups Jr. says no. Tom Leo was supposed to be taking his spot.
That doesn't work. No. I text Jack, and it was at work half hour ago.
Jack Deacon, is he still on it?
He's on. They haven't gotten rid of us yet. I think you were on when we both started.
I was on 18 years.
What year did you,
Hmm.
how many years have you been off?
Well, I was on the GDA way back when we were in the other city hall, the historical building.
Because you were on when I came on, and you were on for quite a while once, Jack and I came on the same year, but I can't remember when that was.
Well, I am sure Kathy can look it up and tell you.
I don't know if I want to know, because I know it was right when I moved. I don't know that I've been back that long. It's just 20-some years.
Jeff, do you have any numbers of the planning? Lee Kramer, Mark Bidet?
I text Jack.
I can go print off the.
Yeah,
list.
if you want to give them a call or something.
I
Yeah.
can print that list.
I'm just
That was like 4 years ago.
It was-
Last month was,
I missed two. I was,
Yes.
I was sick and we didn't have this set up.
I was here.
So the first one, when we got shut down, we didn't have the video thing, but I was sick, so I wasn't coming.
Right.
And the last one I had a conflict. but- And I looked at the city website, because I was looking for the master plan, and I saw the list, too, see, Sarah, she was in it.
Back then, when we did the master.
No, just this week, I swear I looked at it and I didn't see it.
She's on, she resigned. from
She
the
did,
planning
okay, I
commission.
just didn't see it in the agenda or in the minutes or anything.
That's why we have, the first item is election of PC chair.
Yes.
Oh, no way. That goes without saying.
Is Sarah Smith off?
Yes.
Yeah, she resigned.
I know she was on, but I didn't know she was off.
Wow. You know, it's currently illegal to even cross the US-Canadian border on water.
That is,
Can't even sail in Canadian water.
You want to call her?
Yeah.
if you can call, I could call Mark maybe.
Brad?
Is this,
Sarah Smith.
What's that?
for lack of language?
No, it's very rare, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. I think since I've been here, we've only ever,
Jeff
had to
was-
cancel
Jeff
one
was
meeting.
on when I came on, but just-
My 18 years, we never canceled a meeting.
you were the linchpin that held everybody together.
I don't think so,
When I
but
started here, Jen was-
We had a few
Sorry.
planning commission that did,
Did you really have a sign?
At least two since I've been here. and then one or two ZBA meetings.
I don't recall that. At least I never saw it. Someone pointed it at me.
He would write it on,
With
said he would write it on the
COVID,
crack,
you know.
flip it out there.
it is crap.
Can't imagine that.
So, who
He
knows?
was on EDA, Planning Commission, Harbor Commission, School
Our
Board.
governor uses it one time.
Lee, hey, it's Jeff Grimm. How are you today? Oh, yeah, it should be up and going.
It will
He's
be
trying to
probably
access
not
via the
possible, it will
YouTube thing.
probably not be possible to cruise
it's
to
up.
Atlantic Canadian waters.
It's up, but it seems like other people are,
We've got a couple other people that are.
During
up to
the
40.
2020 season.
Yeah,
Why do they?
yeah, well, if you go to the City of River Springs website, there should
Because
be a
Canadian-
link at the
the
top.
border
to go to
closed.
YouTube.
So
You do a lot.
they're also implying that sailing into Canadian waters is also closed.
I don't do many meetings.
Wonder if we should put any
Work-
flag
I worked that
sailing
way.
into
That's
the
good
water.
for you.
Wow.
Swear enough, come on.
Over or whatever, or
I work with all
Yeah.
that.
wire pond.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Also,
Also,
it's
there's the,
illegal right
there's
now
the phone
to,
system you could call.
Is something happening that I don't know, I have the news on every day.
I'm just reading this because I do a lot of sailboat racing and some of our races take you into Canadian waters. Like
Right.
St.
And
St. Clair or Lake Huron
and
or
the phone number and the
Right.
access code for the phone system is, that's the first section of the extra
Yeah,
text
just
about
oral
the
arguments,
agenda. But if you need anything, you can hear me text.
So you were just listening.
I was just listening anyways, and I don't, he couldn't have a bunch of people sitting Zoom and all this, hey, wait a minute, I don't like that idea.
Right, right.
That
You
would
never know when they're gonna talk.
That's right.
Oh,
He
yes,
was
thank
very
you for
polite
that.
about it, and I
Thank you
totally
for pointing
understood
that out.
too.
That's my bad.
Okay.
Based on what I've seen.
Yeah, I failed to change that.
Zoom is an imperfect
All right.
medium in that format. You're coming up with a.
Yeah, no problem. Either,
Tell me
Either
to
way.
calm down now.
either way works. Just, whatever you can do. Thank you. Bye. Lee pointed out that the agenda says that the meeting is for Thursday, May 21. That's for the June 4th meeting.
Ah.
So I messed that
Good
up.
point, I'm
Blame-
seeing that now.
Blame me.
Oh,
But you know what, I think what you said.
That's interesting, because it says the next regular meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 18th.
I think the one you sent us.
No, it says May 20, well, the one on the website says
But I
21.
think the one you emailed to us, that, maybe the email.
It says approvals, just forgot to change the,
Yeah, it's just that top line, which is probably the most important line. Maybe that's why no one's showing up.
well, we posted it on
Nobody
Facebook,
showed up on the 21st.
and on the calendar, on the website calendar, it's on June 4th.
Yeah, it does show that on the front page. is June 4th.
Well, I apologize for that mix up. So yeah, Lee has been attempting to get onto the YouTube thing. He's having issues. He said if he can't do that, he'll
Call in. All right, we'll just give him a couple more minutes.
And then
Texting Mark.
Jack is still working.
He said,
okay, and then we've got Mary. John can't make it.
John,
Jeff Ford is on. Andrew's here. So the only other person is Mark.
I'm waiting to hear back from him.
You reached out to him. Okay.
If we get leave, we're good, right?
If we get Lee,
Yes.
get Lee, we're
That
good.
that would put us at 5 and we'd have 4. Because we have Jeff on YouTube, we've got Mary Catherine on the phone.
Fine. We were talking about this, so the YouTube people, you can't hear them, they can only type things.
Yeah. We've got the comment section on the side.
And then 10-second delay.
This is like a movie with subtitles.
Play by play.
So Victor will, as we get comments, Victor will read those out. Let us know what people say, because it can
Do
be
you
difficult to read.
impersonate each person? Do you try to do their voice?
I want to keep my job.
That's a very good answer. Who's Cal working at Turkey?
Yep.
How's he like it?
He loves it,
I'm trying to figure out what's different.
except now he's trying
So I
to.
think
Well, Lee Kramer trying step 3 on the.
Hey, Lee.
Lee, we hear you on the phone.
Hi, Lee. Thanks. Yeah, some people have been having trouble accessing YouTube, the live stream. Others have been on it. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's,
Your thing.
okay.
Hello?
Yep, hi. Can you hear us?
No? How about now?
It looks like Andrew's getting pretty tired of it.
That's right.
I can see him, I just can't get on.
Well, how'd you know to say no?
He's a lip reader.
Something's looping.
Yeah, because someone's on YouTube and on the,
Yeah, did you hear me echo when I said that?
Yeah.
I guess we have enough.
All
And
right, I think we have a quorum, so I'm gonna do roll call and verify if we can start the meeting at 5:50. Jeannie Benjamin,
Yes.
Lee Kramer,
Sort of.
all right. Jack Deegan is absent, Sarah Smith is resigned. Mary Catherine Hanna,
I'm here.
hi Mary. Jeff Ford is,
Yep, he's here, yep.
He's here. Andrew Bowman. Here. And Mark Bidet. Just checking, because I know he sometimes is on the phone. We have 5, we do have a quorum.
And as a reminder, please, when you're not speaking, please mute your telephone so we cannot have that feed loop back if you're both on YouTube and on the phone. Andy, I guess you are the vice chair, so
So tell me she was gonna resign.
we're at the minutes.
Okay, everyone has a chance to review the minutes.
Is it Mark?
Is that right?
No, it's not.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from last month's meeting? Are there any comments, corrections, edits? Can Lee hear us?
Exactly.
Lee, did you hear that we're doing the minutes? Lee?
You're gonna have to speak up a little bit.
Yeah.
For those microphones on the far side.
Lee, are you still with us?
Did we lose everybody on the phone?
No, unless they
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
maybe Lee has to unmute himself if he muted himself.
Was that Lee?
No,
who was there?
Female.
That was Mary.
No, Mary Kath.
Lee, is your phone muted by any chance?
He was saying he couldn't, that's who wouldn't hear before, right?
You guys have a Ouija board in the closet? Maybe we can get a hold of him that way.
He may have muted.
I will say, like, I think I finally, because I want to be able to see, but I don't like that I can't talk on the YouTube. So I have the YouTube stream going, but I have my speakers turned off and I'm on the phone so that I can talk. I
And you
think
don't-
this is the perfect combination, but we'll see.
Yeah, and you're not getting any feedback from you now, I think. But we may have lost Lee. Feel free to call him and tell him maybe he knows his stuff.
There he is.
That's where I like looking at.
Lee, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We were just, we could tell you weren't able to hear us when we had no comment on the minutes. So we were just, the May 21 regular meeting, the minutes, we were just looking for any comments or corrections.
No comment.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from May 21st.
So moved.
We have support.
Second, Lee Kramer.
Okay, so you have a motion by Jeannie Benjamin and support by Lee Kramer for approval of the minutes as submitted.
Want to do a roll call vote or just,
Yeah.
Andrew Bowman,
yes?
Jeff Ford,
He's a yes, he's a go.
Mary Catherine Hanna,
Yes, approved.
Lee Kramer,
Yes.
Jeannie Benjamin.
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Do we have any public comments or correspondence for things that are not on the agenda tonight?
So I just want to chime in for a quick second to help people so we can structure how we're going to do comments here. It can get a little complicated with having people here, people on the phone, and people via YouTube. So we're going to do this kind of in the same structure, the way that we do when we do our public hearings. We'll introduce the topic, staff will do whatever introduction, and then we'll let everybody know that that's the appropriate time then for public comment. We'll accept all of that public comment. We'll bounce back and forth between people on the phone, anybody that we have that's commenting on YouTube, and people that are here. And then when we feel that we've gotten the comments that we need or whatever, then we'll close the public comment section and move into planning commission discussion. So that we've noticed that it can get kind of complicated if we don't have that structure. So that still provides everybody the opportunity to comment, but then we can move on to discussion for the planning commission and then decision if that's so needed at that time. So the first topic we have, which is actually an easy one, Sarah Smith resigned as chair of the planning commission. So our first action should be to appoint a new chair. If there are any nominations,
I'll nominate Andrew.
let's make sure to speak up so that people on the phone
And on this one,
can,
yeah.
can hear.
Okay.
So we've got a nomination for Andrew Bowman for chair.
Support.
Okay, we have a second from Mary Catherine Hanna. Do we need a roll call? on
We
that?
should probably, if this is also should be a public comment section as well. We should
Okay,
open up to public comment.
So, any public comments? We'll start with public comments on the phone.
Hearing none.
Hearing none, any public comments from people on YouTube?
There's one question from Bob Thompson. Has a new member been appointed? And the answer is no. We have not appointed a new member yet.
At this point, no, it sounds like the mayor has received a couple of applications and he's reviewing those and will appoint at the next meeting.
Probably June 15th.
Any public
Bob
comments?
Thompson again says, seems like a new member has been, until a new member has been appointed, we should wait on a chair. Let the vice chair run the meetings until then.
That is an option that the planning commission can take, I think. Does that sound like a possibility or?
Jeff Ford says, I agree with Bob.
Any comments from anybody here?
Sounds like a logical progression.
So is that something that?
Terribly sorry for me, I can't hear any of the comments at all.
Oh, no? Do we need to speak up more, Lee? So it sounds like the discussion is, we have a motion and a second to nominating Andrew Bowman to chair, but we also have discussion topics about with the possibility of tabling a decision until the next meeting.
So that's a possibility. I don't disagree with that. I just want to say we don't know for sure when another member may be appointed. It could be June 15th. It could be July. We just can't guarantee when the mayor or the council will do that. They are planning on doing it on June 15th, but if the vice chair wants to run the meetings until, if that's what the commission wants to do, then they should, but just want to throw that out there.
Do you want to retract your motion?
That's fine.
Okay, it's you don't have to. That's an option at this time.
We can move on and that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Then we could just table this item for the next meeting. Is that the thought then?
Yep, Jeff Ford says he agrees with Bob and that Andrew can run the meeting until then.
Okay.
Easier if we have more people here, from the planning commission, more than 5.
Sounds like we have a consensus to table for the June 18th meeting.
Yep.
To bring this up again. Next would be on the agenda. So we have a discussion about whether or not Harbor Springs should look to hiring a consultant to assist with the master plan review. I guess that's pretty self-explanatory. We'll first open up to comment. Do we have any comments from anybody on the phone? Do we have any comments for anybody on YouTube, from anybody on YouTube?
Is there any comments from anyone on YouTube about the second agenda item regarding the possibility of hiring a consultant to assist with the master plan review process? Bob Thompson says, I'm sorry, I had intended to send in specific suggestions, but got busy.
Any comments from anybody in the public on this agenda item?
Me?
Don't we already have, isn't there somebody that we're already hiring that's consulting on the master plan?
Well, the city of Harbor Springs has a planning consultant, which is Larry Nix, who assists us with any of our planning matters.
Right.
And he would be, based on that established consultant situation, he would be our go-to guy for any assistance that we would look to for this.
So somebody's asking about having an additional consultant added as a paid.
At the previous meeting of the planning commission, when we were talking about the goal of what we were going to be doing today, the topic was brought up of, did we want to look at hiring a different consultant that would assist us with the master plan process specifically? And there was some discussion about that, or the topic was brought up and it was determined that we should probably have a discussion to make a decision whether we wanted to continue as we are going now or have been, or bring in another consultant and look at getting another consultant for that.
Yes, I would say it seems to be a budget issue. It seems like we have an awful lot of talent that you already have on your board. on the commission. And there's quite a bit of local knowledge and or good people to consult with, I think. So I don't know if it's worth the additional expense. It's just something I'll throw out there.
Bob Thompson writes on YouTube, I believe the PC should hire someone independent. Nothing against the city planner, but it is typical to hire an outsider. The city is paying for a consultant either way. Shouldn't be a budget concern, just utilizing a pair of fresh eyes, potentially more experience. So last call for public comment before we close it off to the public.
Do you need a motion to close the public comment?
I don't think so. We're not really in a
Public hearing.
public hearing, but it's just
We wanna
structure for the flow of the meeting.
Okay, so then
So-
Andy, if you want to close it off to the public.
So we'll, for now, close it off to the public just for the sake of clarity. And we'll like to hear from the planning commission members, both here and the ones who are on the phone and on YouTube.
On YouTube, we already have a comment from Jeffrey Ford. I am very comfortable having Larry continue to lead us through this review.
Larry, how many years have you been with us?
Well, Mary Ellen from the public has asked a question about how long have I been with the city, and I was retained by the city in 1990. So that gives me 30 years of experience working with the city of Harbor Springs.
But you have other clients.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I will defer to you.
You've been through the master planning process with the city. We do it roughly every 5 years, so
This will be my third master plan with the city of Harbor Springs over the past 30 years.
I'm comfortable with Larry, as is Jeff Ford, being the consultant for this process.
We should check to see if anybody else, Jeannie, do you have any?
I couldn't be more
Thoughts?
comfortable with Larry.
Lee Kramer, do you have any thoughts or ideas about item B on the agenda?
Doesn't sound like it. How about Mary Catherine Hanna?
Mary Catherine, do you have any thoughts or concerns on item B of the agenda?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes,
Yes.
Lee. Hi. I can hear you now.
Lee, you still there? Lee?
Yep.
Lee, we can hear you, but just barely.
Speaking to Kramer,
Yes.
Hey, Andrew, move that microphone
Try
closer
to.
to you.
is that any better?
Lee, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Lee, can you hear us? We're able to hear you.
Yes.
You can hear us. Okay, we were just, I don't know if you've been able to hear us.
Perfect. I can hear you over the internet, but I cannot hear you on the phone.
Okay.
So Lee, we are just asking Lee to see if you have any comments about item B on the agenda about Larry remaining the consultant for this master review process, master plan review process.
I do, thank you. Yeah, I think it would be silly to make any change at this time. Larry's been an extraordinary help to the planning commission throughout the period of time I've been involved, 6 or 8 or 9 years, and gone through a planning commission, a master plan before with Mr. Nix, and he's assisted us in every possible way. I don't think it would be economical to change or to add personnel to this endeavor, and all in all, I completely endorse Larry Nix getting praise on this.
Thank you, Lee. Mary Catherine, do you have any comments?
I mean, I guess I would say that I don't have any concerns about Larry's experience or his dedication or history with Harbor Springs, which is all stuff that is incredibly important when you go through the master planning process. My only concern, and I think it can be ameliorated by the work to make sure that we incorporate as much public comment as we possibly can and engage the community, is where we have been is not necessarily where we should go. And by sticking with what we have used before, we run the risk of not to say that Larry would do that, that would be my only thought about bringing in somebody new is, I think as Bob Thompson mentioned, just the fresh eyes perspective, somebody who can come into the community, who has no preconceived notions about who we are or what we should be doing, and can ask questions that it might not even occur to us to ask right now because we are so familiar with the community and so sure in our own minds, based on our own lived experiences, about what should happen. So can Larry do that? I think probably absolutely, and we would just have to make sure that we really monitor and design a process that elicits that. Whereas a cheat around that would be to bring in somebody new, and it could be just somebody to bring in for certain pieces. We wouldn't even necessarily need to hire somebody to, run the whole process. That's just my 2 cents on it.
Okay, thank you. Any planning commission members have thoughts on Mary Catherine's comments or anything to add?
Any planning commission members on YouTube have any comments or thoughts to add to the discussion? I see none from planning commission members. Jeff Ford says no comment.
So with that, it sounds like we've had planning commission discussion. So does there need to be a decision made? Should there be a motion made regarding this topic, or?
I think there should, because we really can't move forward with the master plan process if we don't know who's leading the master plan review. So, I guess it's up to the chair though, the acting chair and the planning commission, if they want to keep this going forward right now, or do they want to delay it until there's a full board? I guess that would be a full board present, I should say. I guess that'd be the question here. We specifically put this on the agenda for today's meeting because it's our master plan discussion agenda, and it was brought up by someone from the public. So I guess, is there a desire by the planning commission to?
I guess my thoughts on it are, and I appreciate Mary Catherine's comments about taking a different, a look at the master plan this time with more, I guess, a fresh look at it. Where last time when we did the review 5 years ago, we did go through it line by line, and we made changes, and those changes I think have resulted in some changes to the zoning code since that and over the last 5 years. So I think if we all go into it with that in mind and we involve the public as much as we can get them to engage this time of year under the circumstances that are out there right now, I feel very comfortable moving forward. With Larry as our consultant for this, as he has been the last 2 or 3 times we've done this. And it's really, I think the onus is on the members of the planning commission to ask the right questions and to have members of the public ask us the right questions, and Larry while he's here. So I'm confident we can give this a very thorough review and make the changes that people think they need to be made to accomplish that. So I'm comfortable with that.
So I think we probably should do a vote then on this issue. And just to let you know, even though we closed the public, there are other public comments on YouTube. Does the acting chair want me to read those comments, or?
If you would, please just catch us up on the last 5 or 6. I've been watching as they come up.
So Bob Thompson said the last master plan never worked in the sense that it never resulted in changes to zoning. John Leo said, unless there's a specific concern, Larry is in the best position to help us out. He has a trust of the planning commission. Bob Thompson said, I don't have any specific concerns with Larry other than the need to think through master plan questions with fresh perspectives. I agree with Mary Catherine. If you want to move forward, you should at least ask new voices. I would suggest offering the opportunity to 3 firms and choose the one that seems like the best fit. Wouldn't delay things very much. You can start the selection process. The full board can help choose. The 2014 master plan did not result in progress on zoning, especially the waterfront.
I think that's, and I'm not taking issue with it, but I think it's fairly clear from the amendments that have been made to the zoning code since 2014 that it has resulted as a guide, guided us in making decisions to change the zoning code. It may not be the changes that everybody thinks needed to be made, but I think the changes have been made. And, from the beginning of this process, we've talked more about trying to determine ways to get the public involved. And I think that's the right way to do it. And I have no problem moving forward with Larry as a consultant.
So I think,
I agree with John Leo's comments.
so I think we would need a motion if someone wants to make a motion.
We have a motion to move ahead with Larry as the assistant consultant for the master plan review.
Absolutely, I say move ahead with Larry.
So we have a motion from Jeannie. We have support.
Lee Kramer, second.
Mr. Kramer seconds. I'll do roll call. Jeannie Benjamin.
Yes.
Lee Kramer. Mary Catherine Ham.
No.
Jeff Ford.
Yes,
Andrew Bowman.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes.
actually, is this a motion that needs, because we only have 5 members here, does it need 5 members?
No.
Pat.
Is that just a special?
Normal motions just need a majority vote.
Okay,
The only thing that requires any special situation there is when we do a special land use request, that specifies that you need a 2/3 majority of the full board for a vote. So that's the one situation where basically in a special land use request, you have to have 6 votes in favor of your proposal.
so here, the majority of those present,
I
that's,
believe it's the majority of
Okay.
those present is what is required. I believe we're on item C, which is the review of the first 43 pages of the master plan.
Okay. And do you want to have, you guys are going to do your basic rundown of an agenda item, or do is open it up for planning commission comment?
Probably the most economical way and organized way to do this is go through it section by section. I don't think we need to go through it page by page, but if that's what we end up doing, that can certainly be accommodated. So the first section starts out in those first 43 pages is the preface. And that sets the foundation for why you're doing the master plan, legal basis, and specifically what the master plan is supposed to include. And there's some 5 or so segments there on that first page. Is there any comments for those physically in the meeting tonight on that page or that section?
When we first, we can go and do phone first, or
However you'd like to handle it, Mr. Chair.
why don't we do I think it's been working well when it's, phone first, comments from the planning commission members, and then YouTube.
Yep.
And if you can read the YouTubes for us, and then we'll go to just Jean and I over here.
so what page or what section are we on first?
We're on
Introduction?
the preface.
Preface, okay, yeah.
Page 1.
Well, for instance, Mary Catherine, can I ask just a general question first? And
Sure.
so Larry, who generally is responsible for writing all of the text that is in here? Is that something that you as the planner involved generally write? Do we take it from somewhere else? Do we line item edit it? Does the planning commission write pieces of it? Like where does this language originate?
The language we have right now in these first 43 pages has 2 different origins. One is myself and people that help me on this, and the other is the Historic Commission who wrote the historical segment of this segment of the master plan.
The Historic Commission, I'm not familiar with that. Who is that?
Well, the historic group that's in town.
The Historical Society.
The Historical Society. Because they provided all the information on the background of the history of the city.
For example, Mary Catherine, Suzie Crater calling, I talked to Eric Hemingway about updating some of the language with respect to the Odawa history.
Yeah,
The last time we did it, and that sort of thing can be done anytime, I would think.
okay.
So I guess, Mary Catherine, the answer to your question is there's a variety of authors, but I would be probably considered the primary author of these first 43 pages. And if there's segments that a particular planning commissioner desires to take on and redo, that would be totally fine by me, just less work that I have to do. Or if you have specific ideas about different elements that want to be added, provide me with that and we can certainly accommodate that.
So is this where we would have the discussion about the format of our plan? Because I really appreciated and liked the suggestion. I think, Larry, you were the one who brought it to our attention, that in sort of modern master plans, a lot of this stuff is often put back into appendices, or, at the end, as opposed to front loading all of this background information that you have to page through to get to the actual plan language. Is this when we would have that discussion, or are we just diving right into talking about the language and we'll talk about format later?
Well, I think the format discussion can be held at a later date as to how we want this physical document to look like when we get all done. The logic behind having these first 43 pages, it sets the stage for a reader who's picking up the plan for the first time or the 10th time, and it lays out the entire background of your community in terms of how we got here, why we're doing a master plan, the history of the community, people, the economy, utility system, everything that makes up the city is in that first stage of the master plan, just as it's written in the language of the law, that's what it says you have to do. This is the historical way that the vast majority of communities do a master plan, is how it's organized this way. There have been some communities that have shortened documents, if you will, a handout of the master plan, but it doesn't constitute the entire document itself. As you know, the master plan is a legal document. It has to stand the test of scrutiny of law also. And that's why it has to be written in such a way that it covers all of those elements. There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with the master plan having a condensed version, if you will, a Reader's Digest version that's organized differently. I've seen master plans done on 11 by 17 sheets folded twice. There's just kind of a fold out that just basically hits the high points. So there's lots of different ways we can format what we want to do, whether it's the official document or if it's going to be just a quick read guide for someone wanting to get a basic idea of what's in the master plan.
And I had a comment to Mary Catherine's comment. I think, I remember from one of the first, there are, as Larry said, there's certain things that are legal requirements that have to be in here. It might be helpful for the next time we meet if we kind of have the bullet points of what those are, so we know really what we can and can't pare down, because it is lengthy and the first part I think is probably the most interesting to read. But if somebody is trying to get more to the point, I think having if you could move some of that to an abridged version as a secondary thing. But I guess understanding very, very clearly what is the Michigan statute, what laws dictate the statute. This says you have to have certain things in the beginning, certain things, to justify the master plan. I think that'd be helpful to have for the next meeting.
I have a PDF, the Michigan, the MSU Extension Office has a number of documents on their website regarding master plan review, things of that nature. And I believe that I have a document that has a spreadsheet in there of outlining some of the sections of the law of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act that kind of itemizes some of those things. It's not a short document because there's a lot of, things that must be included, but I believe I have that saved on my computer, and after the meeting, I can definitely email that out to all of the planning commission members, so that you can have that as a review thing. If I recall, I think it's 17 pages of listing out those things, because there are a number of things there, but I can definitely pull that out, which will then highlight some of those things that must be included in the master plan review, or in the master plan itself.
Yeah, we do have a comment from
Yep.
Jeffrey Ford.
Yeah,
He says, he has a question for Larry. Larry, is the 15 to 20 year period mandated, or is that developed by the municipality?
That's generally the recognized standard for a master plan. You're looking 15 to 20 years into the future with a document, and you're also looking at a review period of every 5 years to make sure there's nothing that has happened in a short-term basis that doesn't require that long-term look to be adjusted.
I'm sorry, Larry, say that again.
A master plan for a community is a document that looks 15 to 20 years into the future. And statutorily, we have a review period that requires every planning commission to look at their master plan every 5 years. And the reason for that is to test the master plan and to review it to make sure that it's still responsive to your community and to what is going on at the present time. Because there's always shifts that happen in a community that are changing. Now, Harbor Springs hasn't shifted that much in the last many years. Actually, very few changes have occurred, but there's been subtle
Well, see, now
things.
there's a point on which, Larry, I would want to have a discussion, because I actually think that Harbor Springs has changed a lot. But then the definition of what has changed, I mean, when you talk from a planning perspective, yes, I think, the actual uses of land in, specific designated areas haven't changed, but how we live and how we view how we live and who is living here and what we see the future of Harbor Springs, I think that actually has changed. And I think that's one of the things that we're struggling with is, given those changes, then how do we look, take into account where we have been and where we are going. So I guess maybe that's what I'm struggling with a little bit here, in terms of both the formatting and what goes into the history. So I apologize, I should have clarified what I was asking you so Jeff Ford asked, is the 15 to 20 year period mandatory? And you said, no, it's customary. And is it customary because the plan typically looks 15 to 20 years in the future? And so 15 to 20 years in the past is kind of the mirroring that it's doing? Is that the theory about why the 15 to 20 year time frame on the look back? The history?
I think the history goes back further than 15 to 20 years. I think it's sort of established, just from having read it, I think that the 15 to 20 years, I believe, only references, a reasonable amount of time in which anybody could look into the future and be somewhat accurate.
Well, that's in terms of so the population growth, goes back to 1970s. I know we're jumping ahead here. Some of those other statistics, we're looking back to 2000 as the time frame to start looking at statistics for, and that's meaningful, right? When you start talking about trends and changes. If you look, a statistic that looks from 1970 to 2000 is going to look different from one that looks at 1990 to 2000. And so I think, Jeff, that is a very relevant question, is once we dive into the data, which I know we're not there yet, we're just in the process. So I apologize for jumping ahead. So the process is just legal. It's just what has to be here, right? There's nothing in the process. Sorry.
Jeffrey Ford has a comment. I would have no problem looking at master plan format options.
I agree. I think if we go through the content probably now and maybe we pare things down as much as we, if it's possible, if we can, once we kind of know the content that we want to use, and then with the whole time, kind of with the look to, okay, we're gonna change the formatting. Once you have the content, you kind of know what boxes it might fit in, what format it may best fit. And then if there's a way to develop a condensed version for people that want to have a more, whether it's both online, have the full master plan that's required by law, and then have something that's a little more reader friendly.
Right.
But I'm all for kind of thinning out some of the minutia that we get into later. That's why I wonder if that may have to be there, in terms of the utilities and those kinds of things that I may or may not have been quite as awake as I was reading those sections as the historical stuff. That's a little more interesting.
Basically, there's a section in the statute that requires or allows municipalities to do master plans. And this is found in section 125.3833 of the Planning Master Plan Act. A master plan shall address land use and infrastructure issues and may project 20 years or more into the future. A master plan shall include maps, plats, charts, and it goes on and explains that. But I knew there was a guideline in the statute about time.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't pull it off the top of my head, and I had to look it up. So I found that it says it may project 20 years or more into the future. So that's where that 15 to 20 or 25 year, whatever number is used by the municipality for doing a master plan. When you're earlier this year or I think it was this year, Victor brought forward the capital improvement plan. And that is a 5-year plan the city council looks at, which is short-term project oriented to make physical changes in the community. The master plan itself is a much broader view of all of the elements of the city. One of the primary objectives is the use of the land, transportation system, bike paths. We can get into recreation, other capital improvement ideas, and other various issues that are identified by the community. Now, we haven't, I think a lot what Mary Catherine is saying is there's other issues that historically the master plan has not been touching upon. Land use pattern is pretty much set in the city of Harbor Springs. But there's a lot of other changes, and I don't disagree with you, Mary Catherine, at all, because there have been, and I've noticed those going on with who owns property, how the property is being used. I mean, we had the whole issue earlier last year about vacation rentals of property, which is something new that wasn't occurring 20 years ago up here, or very low. And at the same time, the city recognized that and made adjustments to accommodate that and to provide some reasonable regulations for that use that was going on here in the city. But through public input and through your knowledge as planning commission members, we're going to be identifying what those challenges might be that we need to address as part of this master plan update. So with that, we need to look at 20 years in the future as to how the changes that we might suggest today in this master plan to make sure that continues with the vision that everyone wants for the city of Harbor Springs. And thus the history and what the implications of that history means is important to the city. It carries a heavy level of influence, the same as public input does, whether it's done with one-on-one discussions or group discussions or in a survey about what the public opinion is on elements that have been identified by the Planning Commission and other public input we've had about what we should ask the people in this community their opinions on. Now, with the current COVID-19 situation that we have, it may be very challenging to get a group of 50 to 100 people in a gymnasium, because certainly couldn't do it here in City Hall and keep our social distancing and to solicit their opinions. So we may be looking at some other innovative techniques of how to collect public input other than what we're currently doing right now with YouTube and voice and people live and keep social distancing. But that public input element, I think, is extremely important with this new updated master plan. Because we need to document those changes, and is it something the entire community or the majority of the community thinks it's important or not important? And to prioritize those so we can address them appropriately.
There is a question from Jeff Ford. He says, thanks, Larry. What would you call the master plan? Guidance, advisory, drop dead directional. All these terms basically show up in the first 43 pages.
Well, the master plan is a guide. It's not a legal, it is a legal document, but it doesn't have the force of an ordinance. You know, there's laws out there that say you can't drive over 65 or 75 on the highway, okay? Those are laws. Some people view those as guides, so as speed limits, unfortunately, but that's maybe not a good example. But the master plan itself is actually a guide. It's not a mandate that you shall do all of these things in a specific time frame, but they're statements and policies that the community strives to achieve through a 20-year time frame, and reviewing all of those policies every 5 years to make sure, are we still on track? Are those things we still want to try to achieve?
And I'd just like to add to that, and that is where the political aspect comes in. When every few years you change council members, and then they might have a different idea of where they want the city to go direction-wise. So then what might have applied 5-6 years ago, all of a sudden, or even 3 years ago, all of a sudden is not as important to the new council members. So right then and there, they might not be wanting to pass any ordinances that apply, that would have come up as a result of certain parts of the master plan. So there's that as well.
Point well taken.
I think, it's been nice, we kind of aren't going line by line, which I think is probably more effective, or even section by section. But I guess one thing from reading the first 43 pages, and it kind of ties into what Mary Catherine's been saying and what Larry brought up with the rentals. It was brought to us really by Jeff and Victor, I think at the time, that it was becoming more prevalent. A lot of properties weren't in compliance. I was sort of catching up, but I think if I had one thing, in the next 5 years that I before the next master plan review that I think should be in this version is some basic goals for trying to encourage and retain longer term rentals, because that's really going to be the more that's really is the affordable housing here. And so I think the short term rentals, we did I think a proficient job at getting something in the zoning code that handles it for now. But I think something that isn't in the master plan from 5 years ago is to contemplate what VRBO and Airbnb mean to small towns. And they can be positives and there can be a lot of negatives. And the negative probably is they tend to drive up the cost of housing because the value goes up when it suddenly is something that's worth more on a nightly basis than a weekly basis or monthly basis. So getting into too much detail, but I guess something that probably could be incorporated in the sections we're talking about, the preface, is talking a little bit more about what neighborhoods have historically been year-round, kind of family neighborhoods, and what have been resort and what have been more part-time. Just to kind of give a little bit of the history of kind of what has traditionally been, Main Street. When I was a kid, you could trick or treat there. Now, you go to it's harder to find those streets, but and that's not. Change is inevitable, and it's not something that you can stop, nor should you try to fight against it all the time. You got to just manage it best you can. So I think some recognition of the fact that a lot of the high school being in town is such a key element to Harbor Springs, and they did such a great job of keeping it in town. I think everything was 5 years ago. It was probably 20 years ago that they kept it in town, but it's just that I think is another thing, that the tradition of the high school being in town. Not that there's going to be a move to move the school anytime soon, but it'd be nice to recognize that as a really significant part of the local,
sense of community.
Yeah, it's a town. It's been a wonderful town in the sense that it means very, very much to people who have grown up and lived here, and, that's fine. And the people that only get to spend a few weeks a year here. So that's the part you gotta get into the master plan that is, yes, it's ever changing. Tom Gallagher said something so smart years ago. He said, everybody thinks of Harbor Springs as what it was the day they moved here. And everything that happens after that is either great or terrible, but it's, everybody still wants to move. You know, most of us stay who come, even if you move back for the summer in 1996 and think you're never, here I am, I haven't left again yet. But I think that that kind of sense of the community where it's something to people who only get to spend a few weeks here, and it's something to people who've spent 10, 20, 30, 40, 85 years here. So I think that's the part that maybe is something I would like to see worked into the preface. Okay.
Just a comment from Jeff Ford. Okay, Andrew, that is why I want you as chair. Very nice. And we do have public comment, but I just want to reaffirm, are we going to wait until we have this entire discussion, or do you want me to?
Why don't we catch up periodically, just so then they won't be as relevant. If we go 15, 20 minutes, we might not be as relevant as what's being said at the time.
Okay, so from Bob Thompson, we just have a few comments. Some of the subjects in pages 1 to 43 need research and potential updating. Who does that? Mary Catherine is correct. Modern master plans do not include all of the historical details up front. They usually start with goals. The Harbor Springs master plan is old style. I recommend the Planning Commission review some newer master plans as part of the process. The modern planning process is much more forward-looking and much more collaborative. Harbor Springs has absolutely changed in the last 10 to 15 years. And then Jeff, for a reply to that, Bob, I would go a step further and say that Harbor Springs has changed dramatically in the last 5 years.
For the good or the bad.
Yes.
I think it depends on how you use your property. I've noticed a significant change, talking about short-term rentals again, just in the number of short-term rentals that are here. I think we've also seen the change coming from my assessing background in the number of year-round residents that we have just in the last 5 years. 5 years ago, we were just starting to recover from the housing market crash, where we had significantly higher number of people that lived here year-round. And in the last 5 years, I would say the majority of the home sales have been people that are buying second homes that are not here year-round, that are only here in the summer. And that's been a big trend here, just recently. So, yeah.
So, and I mean, I asked, why on mute?
No, we can hear you.
Sorry. And that's kind of why I asked about format, which, seems, in some ways, form sometimes drives the discussion. So, to Andrew's point, if some of these are the way we want to frame the discussion and frame how we're thinking about where we want to see Harbor Springs now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, I think these beginning pages, and how we shape that up are really important. And so, even just a suggestion about putting the goals up front just changes how you approach this document and how readable it is, how accessible it is to people, how it gets used. If you pick this up and in the first 43 pages you fall asleep reading the utility statistics, that's not a useful, friendly document for people to go to say, all right, what development, what planning can we have for Harbor Springs in the future? So that would be my thought about it. But in order to move us forward, Andrew, what's your suggestion about, do we want to go section by section, line by line at this point? Do we want to make some recommendations about, because I agree that the historical stuff really, I would think that Eric Hemingway would want to have a lot to do to rewrite some of the early historical pieces there. They kind of are offensive. But, how do we want to move forward?
I think keeping, probably a condensed, is just my opinion, a preface that sets the stage for, reminds the people who do live here or helps educate the people who haven't didn't, are new to the area and want to read the master plan, which is a unique person, but they're out there. But I feel like if you had a preface that was historically relevant and really spoke to kind of the current status of Harbor Springs, because that is going to be different tomorrow as it was different yesterday, especially right now. But I do love the chapter on soils, but I suspect that probably doesn't need to be on page 9. So that's, I think we're probably smart, if we do anything intelligently, is to move from content and form kind of seamlessly and at the same time, because, you could fairly quickly probably go through, not to pick on soils and topography, but those sections really probably don't need to be in the first, unless it's required by law, which I don't know, be moved further back and more of a reference sort of statistical portion of the and some things are relevant. Obviously, the water, the description of the harbor. I mean, that is the whole reason we're all here. So
It is not.
and the ski hills, yes, in the city. The ski hills aren't in the city,
No, it's the people. It's
but
the people.
I think that's and like Dave just said, and maybe speak more to the people that are that really make this what it is. But I agree, we can take large sections probably of the preface and move them somewhere. So it probably makes sense to go through the content, maybe not line by line, but just sort of by the chapters and then by the headline, the bullet points, and just say, okay, is this something that needs to be up front, or can it be annexed? And if it can, and at the same time, is there any comment on, we understand, I think, the historical things, that is a topic that's, the way you say things changes yearly, if not monthly, if not daily, so that needs to be given a good hard look, the history. But I think that's relevant, and I personally would like to see a little more, we get into rail transportation in 1906, 1932, and then we go to tech. So I think it would be nice with the school and something that gives you a little more continuity from way back to more recent times, and not a huge section, but something that speaks to it, and then maybe move more of the kind of technical descriptions of the area into an annex or just a later chapter. Does that make sense?
Are we in any public comment, or you guys just having a
I
discussion?
think right now, just to not confuse the people on the phone and the email, but we have to remember to ask, because we're doing the public comment on these two
Forms
meetings.
first.
Yeah, forms, and we'll get back, but.
My guess, something like soils, topography, that's probably maybe a category that is one of those things that we need to have something
Right.
in that section. Where it falls, I'm sure we can probably adjust. I wanted to say, I'm a big proponent. I think there's two types of readers for a master plan. I think there's a reader that maybe, let's say that they're looking to move to Harbor Springs and they just want a quick overview of, what is it going to be like bringing my kids to school here or something, or maybe they just want to be involved in the community and they want the Cliff Notes version. They want to see the goals. They want to see some of those things. They don't need the whole document. So I like the idea of having a small pamphlet, let's say, that covers that briefer discussion. And then you have a reader that they're probably reading through the master plan in more detail because they're preparing to submit some type of a plan to the planning commission that is going to be maybe a public hearing for a big project or something. And they're going to be wanting to see some of these other sections in more detail. I think the idea of the order of where it falls is probably something that we can definitely adjust.
Yeah.
But like soils, that's probably not something that really has changed much either. So some of these topics we can probably, say, is this still, current and consistent with what we find in Harbor Springs? Review that, move on to some of the other ones, which probably maybe do change a little bit more.
And there is a third reader, and that is staff and council members and commission members that need to use this as a guide to implement the direction. So, I'm just trying to say that because in a certain context, history might matter, but at a certain point, they're looking at, all right, here's what we have to do. How do we do it? So I mean, there is a variety of reasons why people would read it, and yeah, so.
And I guess, for the sake of kind of moving the discussion tonight forward, and our intent was to sort of work through the first 43 pages, but I think we're sort of getting an idea of how we're going to go about this. Well, let's look at, keep an eye on, look at the content with an eye on the format, and then figure out what pieces that, I think tonight it would make sense if we sort of went through chapter 1, read the title. We've already, I think, gotten good feedback that we need to update, make sure we're being culturally sensitive in the way we handle the history and identify different groups of people and talk about that. And then as we move down, if somebody on the planning commission or public has a comment on a certain subtitle that we're on, because we all read this 43 pages before the meeting, we'll need to be able to sort out, that needs to be set aside, and Larry and city staff needs to go update the research or update the language, or if people have personal suggestions as to what to do with it, maybe those are topics that next meeting when we come back, we would circle back to those specific subtitles that we know needed to be addressed, and okay, here's the feedback, here's the improved version or improved draft. But there's certain sections where soils we probably don't need to, although we've talked
Right.
about it a lot tonight. As an example, we don't need to talk about it a lot.
But you're absolutely right, because staff can easily populate things like the population changes, right? That's
Right.
really just going into census data or the American ACS data and getting that. So certain things that's just fact finding, but then there's the actual, so a lot of this is just fact finding. And then that's where the format comes in afterwards, right? We have all these facts. Now, how do we want to present these facts? At the end, at the beginning, in the middle? Do we want to make a story out of it, which would take forever, but I'm just saying.
So I guess, for the sake of tonight, I would say, why don't we try to move through, if everybody's okay with this, and, everybody speak up if you're not, because I don't need to leave the whole thing from the front. But if we could go through the chapter, and then what I'm calling the subcategory, which is the little bullet point to the left, maybe that's a formatting issue right there, since they're not numbered or identified. History, we've discussed that a little bit. And then if people have, in their review, if you've got comments on certain sections as we get to them, please let us know, and then we can highlight those, whether it's just updating the data, updating the language, or kind of a rewrite of a certain subtitle, or things that we just think aren't even relevant. And if they don't need to be in there by law, let's discuss whether we take them out or leave them. So
I do have one comment. I remember from last meeting, I think it was Jeff Ford, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but asked a question about limiting how long these meetings last, because he said something about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I'm not sure exactly, but keep that in mind, I guess, as we're going through this, how long, because we could get tied here for 3
and
hours.
that's kind of what I'm trying to make it into. Let's hit the chapters, the bullet points on the left, or the subtitles, whatever you want to call them. Everybody quickly sort of say, let's identify this one as one that needs data updated, research if we can eliminate it, or a more extensive review by staff, or if a member of the public or the planning commission wants to take it on as sort of their, take a crack at it, so to speak. They could work with Larry or work with you guys to try to do that. So, and I for the sake of clarity, I nominate Larry to read the chapters, since I'm scrolling on a computer, which means I always get lost.
And I guess I can certainly do that. And one thing to keep in mind, this is the City of Harbor Springs master plan. Okay, I am here only to help guide you through this process and to expound, to throw mud against the wall with ideas, a different thing, and I do that all the time, and sometimes I've limped home too, because you didn't like my ideas. Others you've embraced, and that's fine, that's my job. Okay, some of them get pretty wacky, some of them because I've seen them in other locations and people have liked them and you didn't, and that's fine. But it's your master plan. So when it's all said and done, the worst thing that I can have happen is, well, it's Larry's master plan. No, it's not. The best thing that can happen to me is we like our master plan. And Larry helped. but it's your plan. That's what we need to get to. So the first chapter is introduction and history. Andrew has provided us with some input, Mary Catherine has provided us with some input and some ideas as to who may even want to rewrite that. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Second chapter is natural features. Now, this is a broad category that includes geology, topography, soils, water resources, climate, natural resources, land use, and mineral resources. I could go to the back of the book, but it's part of the foundation of what this community is and what it was based on.
I mean, one way to handle that would be potentially in the history, kind of writing why those natural features have been historically significant, whether it was trade or lumber, I mean, something, and then identify in that history, for detailed natural features, see appendix, and just get them out of the way, so they're not chapter 2, if that makes sense to people.
That does, so, but backing up a second, are we deciding now on a plan, for addressing the rewrite of the history section? I mean, we've mentioned Derek Hemingway, we've mentioned the Harbor Springs Historical Society, or are we just at this point noting that it needs to be rewritten in some fashion and we'll figure out how that's gonna happen down the road?
I think the thought was, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right one, is that we would identify the sections that need the most attention. And then between now and the next meeting, or if we can identify tonight things that can be, assigned, then we would do that now, but try to keep moving this forward with hopefully the goal of wrapping this up by 7:30, which would be 2 hours total, to get to a point where we have a plan of what sections need to be brought back in future meetings and what sections really are updating the data or removing or, basically remain the same. So it's more of a broad get from front to back in the first 43 pages, which we may or may not accomplish tonight, but at least identify the sections, and then we may be able in the discussion tonight be able to say, okay, well that's staff, that's Larry, that's somebody who wants to take on that section, or we all need to do more thinking about it or reading about it. But I think that just for the sake of getting somewhere tonight, I think that's probably our best approach.
Yeah, I guess I understood from the other day that this meeting was going to go about the factual content of the first 43 pages.
Right. And it's
Not
being the first,
necessarily the layout, the format.
right,
where
being
it
the
needs
first
to live.
meeting for the review. I think that, next time we'll kind of hopefully hit the ground running with the idea that, all right, if this process we think is working, then we'll continue it with the next sections. But does that make sense?
Yes.
So we have the natural features, which we feel might be something a section that probably has not changed significantly, at least from.
Well, the one thing I would say that might have changed is the water fluctuation levels when it comes to natural features. That's something we would want to consider, is that, we're at the peak of water high. So just something to,
That's a good point.
yeah, and how that affects then use of the waterfront properties.
People speaking in the back of the room are inaudible to me.
That's okay. It's just Dave McVicker.
No, that was Victor.
Never mind.
That was Victor.
Who was it? Should we tell Lee what,
That was Lee Kramer.
Lee, can you hear this? Lee?
Yes.
So it was just a comment on high lake levels and if that should be how we play that into what we are doing and how that affects the shoreline.
Right, there just should be reference in the natural, right?
And looking through some of the some of the bullet points on the left, whether it's water resources, soil, then topography. I mean, if there's a way to, I guess we probably need each one of those sections, and I don't see those as being something. Maybe we have staff review those and find out if there's anything significant that's changed, but other than what Victor said, I mean, the last time we were doing this in 2014, we were 1 year removed from almost the all-time record low. And here we are now, almost at the record high, so it's.
So, yeah, I think addressing that fluctuation could impact how we use that land.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's good to take pictures now and realize how high the water goes, so when you build a fire pit, at a city park closer to the water, 10 years from now, you'll understand it's gonna be a duck pond when you're done, so. I think with that, is everyone comfortable moving on to the next, chapter 3?
Chapter 3 is population.
Yeah, I would just make one comment. I think, and I'm wordsmithing, we'll get more sophisticated as we go through this, but there are a couple of places that I might make some suggestions, but they're very small, so I can do that, offline to Larry or somebody else.
Great.
So rephrasing some stuff.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
Comments and thoughts on chapter 3, population? Growth, age, size, ethnic, income, education.
I mean, I think again, most of these are just statistics that need to get updated. I have a few suggestions about, again, just sort of framing and phraseology. I have a question when we get down to, all the way down to, employment, about why we have separate tables that break out male and female employment. Like, to what's the purpose of, like, it should just be one chart about common employment. We don't need to split out women and men. That is entirely irrelevant in the same chart for table 5, which are all the way down in pages 23 and 24.
Right.
Yes, my thought, Mary Catherine, is that may have just been something at the time that the planning commission may have felt was important to designate the difference between the two.
I think my guess is it's actually, that was the way whatever entity aggregated those statistics, that's probably how the categories were.
Right, and
based,
somebody just grabbed that chart.
Exactly.
We don't need it.
Yeah.
We can find a different way to put that information in there.
No, that's a good point.
I do have one comment about demographics, and is there a way, which I don't know if there is a feasible way to do this, but is there a feasible way to track the non-permanent residents' demographics? And is it, because they are a critical part of our city during certain parts, and even though they're not, voters, they do, how do we get them to reflect in the master plan? And should we?
And I think as it's shifted from more of a year-round community, I mean, that's been the general trend. It's fluctuated over time, but I think it is very important to keep in mind that, whether we're lucky enough to get to spend all year round up here, whether you're lucky enough just to spend a few weeks a year, if you're a property owner or a longtime renter resident, we want to be able to have some accounting for that. I guess you would have it from a registered voter versus non-registered voter, gives us that, that population split a little bit.
I think there's some various resources that we can look to. Some that the city has itself as far as voter registration.
Yeah.
Some that I have as the assessor as far as what people are claiming the use of their
Principal
home for,
use.
principal residence or not. Also, there are a number of organizations that we can work with, such as Networks Northwest out of Traverse City. They've, in the last couple of years, provided quite a number of different resources. And they're very quick to get out new resources. Like they just sent out something last week or this week regarding changes in unemployment due to the COVID situation. So I think they have a lot of information, and they may have information related to, non-year-round residents or people that are just coming here for tourism in the summertime. We can definitely reach out and see what they might have or other resources and try and add that information.
And I think that's obviously then, based on those comments, I would suggest that that's one of the chapters that we review obviously again at the next meeting, and probably the next meeting after that. I don't think any of these necessarily what we would consider done until we're done with the whole master plan.
course.
There are gonna be some chapters that we're revising for the next however many meetings, but is everybody comfortable moving on to,
Chapter 4, housing and economic development.
I guess the one thought I have on the housing, or the biggest thought I have on that is probably similar to tracking the year-round versus seasonal to account for seasonal residents and renters. We want to, have their thoughts incorporated in the master plan also, but developing a new category, really under housing type that we would probably identify as short-term rental. And again, it won't be up to the minute accurate, but some percentage of the city residents that we think are being used and probably going on Airbnb and VRBO like we've done in the past. Or now through the licensing, I guess we really should have a pretty good, I just think having some identifier of, okay, these are long-term residents, whether they be land or tenants or owners, and then these are properties, the percentage of the properties that are being used on a quasi short-term
Investment
basis. So. Any other thoughts on any of the subcategories under housing and economic development, or any thoughts to splitting housing from economic development? I don't know if those are necessarily.
I think
I
that's,
think it might be helpful
Yeah.
to split them.
Yeah, I don't. I think it sounds like something you always say together, but certainly in our area, they're pretty different.
And I think it might help to highlight both of them if we split them out as opposed to lumping them together. Because as you say, there are a lot of other things that go into economic development besides housing.
Right.
And there are a lot of considerations around housing that I think we could bring up a little bit.
Yeah, I think we could do a better job on both of them if they're not under one chapter.
Right.
And that makes a lot of sense because housing has been a pretty major topic over the last several years. Whether it's seasonal or whether it's worker housing or affordable housing.
Yeah.
So it may be wise to broaden that category in this update.
Yeah, I mean, chapter 4 basically is just housing. There's no economic development really even spoke of in there.
Any online or telephone? Sorry, we didn't look back.
yeah, Jeff Ford says, I agree, needs to be addressed separately. And then there was just a public comment by John Leo, I need to leave the meeting. I agree with Jeff that Andy's focus will benefit the group. Thank you for your work to get the master plan updated. That's all.
Okay, moving on then to chapter 5, community facilities and services. This is on page 29 of the master plan.
Any initial thoughts or comments or placement ideas for this? Something that's come up that jumps out because we now have a Parks and Rec position filled, is that?
Parks and Rec director, yeah.
Okay. Probably haven't really focused on that as much in the past because we didn't really have a director. And it's a fairly short, for as many parks as we have in town, recreational facilities is probably fairly brief.
And we had 1990s, we had a Parks and Recreation plan that hasn't been updated since the mid-1990s. We do have a Marina Recreation plan that's kind of focuses on the waterfront that was updated a couple years ago. But even though we have the Parks and Recs plans, I think I did notice that we should probably have a little more beef, Parks and Rec substance in here because it's such an important part of our small geographical size town.
And I think there was a survey you did
Yeah.
that I was surprised with how many different things people wanted to see in some of the parks, which I think that's something, certainly all of this needs public input, but that might be something where you really focus with surveys and go back to that same survey or do another one where, what do people want to see? Do they want to see things in the public parks, or they really like some that are just open space? That was one thing that came away from the survey, I think, so.
And I don't know if this is also a good place to put this in here, but the loft working space, who knows if it will survive the co-working space downtown, but that is kind of a community facility in a way. We have the educational facilities as colleges. So, I mean, is that the type of things that we want to see going forward in Harbor Springs, is more co-working spaces and incubator spaces? And I think a co-working space is, in my opinion, like a community facility. But I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe there's a better place for it, and maybe it won't last. I hope it does, but that definitely changes with the changing type of work we have here, remote work. And now with COVID-19, remote work even being more of a thing.
Yeah.
So,
I think companies are discovering that it's possible.
Yep.
To continue to be productive, and people aren't at the physical workspace for a lot of industries. So,
Based on the last month, I think you're going to see more year-round residents here soon, based on the traffic in the office. So,
yes.
Yep.
and then people that are considering it, if not totally full-time, a lot closer to full-time than what they may have been doing before.
Jeff Ford does have a comment. Need to update the move of 5th grade to middle school status. Minor detail amendment. Now the 5th graders are considered middle schoolers here.
There was a lot of talk in that survey too about incorporating more school, like the PAC or the pool, or is
Yeah.
any of that needing to go here? Is that something we add to this area that we have to look at, or is?
I think it could be.
I don't know.
Under the recreational facilities.
It's just, I just remember that from the survey that.
Yeah.
I think that's, maybe having that survey at the next meeting, if we go back into, just to remember, it was really good. It was.
Yep.
I thought, well, people responded to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of responses. Yeah.
So,
And going off of that with the economic development part in the previous chapter, just to say that the DDA did put out a survey on COVID-19 issues related to how they want to see the downtown changed. And we'll be talking about those potential changes at the next planning commission meeting in our public hearing part. But that survey had like 380 responses, and there was a lot of ideas about whether people want to see more curbside pickup or things like this, that I think we should, if we bring those surveys that we've done, we can bring those to you guys, email them to you, and so you can look at them.
and those are more short-term, potentially short-term changes just to address them.
Right, but
Maybe some of them. stick
some of them
around.
might stick, yeah.
Okay.
There might be a push for them to stick if they're successful. Yeah.
Any more immediate thoughts or comments on the, discussed educational facilities, maybe detailing those and updating what Jeff spoke about with where the 5th grade lands? As the parent of a 5th grader, I can't tell you what they are, middle school or elementary. So that would be nice. Maybe the master plan will clarify it. So I know they didn't go in the Halloween parade, which was not well received.
What grade?
They didn't, 5th grade didn't do the Halloween parade this year because they were middle schoolers, which nobody knew until, anyway, just an aside, but,
Just don't eliminate the parade.
right, never. No.
Okay, the last chapter in this initial section of the master plan is chapter 6, utilities and transportation. It starts on page 33 and goes 10 pages to page 43.
Larry, I just had one question back at, like, with healthcare and senior services, with the changes made to the, Friendship, this was done prior, obviously, to the Friendship Center relocating. Mary
Rebuild
Catherine,
down there, the rebuild.
I don't know, does that senior services section seem to match with, what's down at,
Hillside.
Hillside? I was gonna say Bluff side, but I wasn't right, so.
Okay, no, not really. I mean, we probably could rewrite this, and, it's interesting that Bay Bluffs is not really highlighted here at all as a service. And I mean, technically, Terrace is not in the city of Harbor Springs, it's in West Trafford Township,
Right.
but, yeah,
Okay,
so we can, we definitely could update this.
okay.
Okay,
Utilities and transportation, the only thing I can think of is the ferry company now for transportation and how that might affect things, as well as the MGO, the busing system that the county is using that comes into Harbor Springs. And now there's questions about that, whether that's going to stay around or not, but it's for transportation, the ferry and the MGO bus.
And maybe we move, not that it's not important, but maybe transportation comes above sewer.
Yeah, I would almost think that transportation comes up, in clusters with the chapter, or however we split it out with housing, and economic development. It seems like that's where transportation should go, not down with utilities.
Right, because the city doesn't really, I mean, I always think of utilities as the city, and the transportation, the city really, I mean, they provide streets and sidewalks and things, but there's no municipal bus system or.
Right.
So I don't know, that might make more sense to put transportation up with housing, if housing, economic development are split and transportation was,
Economic
those.
development,
right, it's sort of one,
'cause that's gonna
Right,
contribute
and I
to
would
that.
argue that transportation, like housing, is a key piece of economic development, although also has its own sets of considerations, so, yeah.
I do have a comment about other utilities. So there's a brief mention about our electric distribution system. I mean, I think that deserves a little bit more attention for a few reasons. We're a small city, yet we have our own electric department. And that's, sewer is not, is run by the authority, which constitutes the townships, but this electric, we expand beyond our city limits, providing electricity. But also, to go on with that, we are looking at renewable energy projects, potentially at the Harbor Sewer Authority land, potentially we have the VGP program, the Volunteer Green Pricing Program. So I think if that's the direction Planning Commission wants to look at, is incorporating renewable energy prospects in the utilities section. I don't know if that's the right spot for it, or if there's another spot for it. Like,
I think I didn't know this because I just grew up here and I thought it was normal, but it seems fairly unique that a city of this size
Yes.
is its own utility. And-
Yep.
And I think.
Okay, there's probably another element, city went through a major flood zone issue.
oh, yeah,
And that probably should be addressed in here,
Yeah.
the details of that, or just the overview of that.
that's a good point.
The impact that has on the city.
And there is a little, it's funny you mentioned that because I read the flood zone, that comes below non-motorized transportation. So I guess speaking more to the fact that it was addressed and what was addressed and, kind of memorializing the fact that we should now be in compliance with the new FEMA maps, unless they change the FEMA maps again.
And we are in the process right now regarding the non-motorized transportation. We talk about the Little Traverse Wheelway Bike Trail, and we're almost there to seeing if we get that tunnel to be used. So during this process, we might get approval to, use that tunnel as part of the bike path, and then the fundraising would begin by the committee. So just keep that in mind as we go forward, that, that might want to be amended, just to add that.
Include I think that's.
Well, and I think that bike trail should also include, because it ties right into the section of the North Wheelway that goes to Alanson, Odin, Conway, Poshwang. I think the more villages and cities you include in that, it becomes a more viable thing, more destinations.
Hasn't it already reached, Mackinac?
Well, you can go all the way to Mackinac.
That's
but
a
it's not
different
main.
trail.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a
But
different.
I'm just saying the
Next.
wheelway ties right into that, so, you can go on the wheelway all the way to Charlevoix, you can go on the wheelway all the way to Mackinac City,
Right.
by just making a turn down there by Pumco or whatever
I
it
think,
is.
I think those sections, the non-motorized transportation, and I guess if to what Dave's saying is if you do make transportation and utilities separate, you give more
Emphasis.
airspace to the wheelways and things, as opposed to just non-motorized is kind of one paragraph, and that sort of plays into the
Yep.
renewable energy.
Larry, I don't know if this is going back a few sections, a natural features section. We do have a tree board now that I think was, established in 2014 or 15. So kind of right after or right around the time this plan was created. And the tree board, we're going through getting bylaws and working on a tree plan. So I don't know if there's a way to just incorporate trees, I guess, because that's a contentious and valued, resource
Yes.
here. So I think,
You're right, having it mentioned in here gives us more reason to continue and,
Yep.
shows that we think in 15, 20 years that should still be here.
Right, maybe it's labeled something with a green belt, green belt, maintaining green belt with the tree board. Green space.
And the maps that all fall in the water distribution, does any of the recent sewer and projects, none of them really moved significantly, I guess you just insert the updated maps.
Yeah. There's been concerns about, do we need these water distribution maps in here?
Seems like it could be an annex if nothing else.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about in the long term, and we don't have to worry about this, but we're talking about like safety concerns about someone knows our system. They know where the pipes lead to if they ever wanted to do something. But I'm not against it. It's been brought up as a concern. So
We actually discussed that in 2014 when we put this plan together, and the powers to be at the time indicated that that's not a problem. It's just a distribution system. There's really not a central point to gain access to it.
I guess if the information is available, I don't think if we take it out, we're not shortchanging the master plan or making it hard for somebody who needs to know what it is, find it. But I don't feel strongly either way. Frankly, it's probably not. Unless you really have good eyes, you're probably not able to read it. I'm not sure how much value there is to it. 8.5 by 11 PDF. You can zoom in a little bit now.
So yeah, really you're interested in this is if you're buying a house and you want to know if you can connect to water. Is the water going to connect to your house or the sewer going to connect to your house?
Exactly.
That's really what these are really useful for an individual perspective.
And the maps could be put together differently, just showing the areas
The area.
served by sewers, served by public water. Yeah. Yep.
I don't see any other comments from members on YouTube except Jeff Ford. I didn't say I liked it regarding the 5th grade going to middle school.
So noted. This has provided a lot of grist for the mill for these first 6 chapters of the master plan. It's going to give myself and staff, I think we're going to have a little how are we going to manage these adjustments. I also see that it might be helpful for the planning commission members to have a outline of all of the major chapters of categories in this master plan, and then we can start to play with who's on first and what's on second and so on and so forth for the organization of the document. It may provide that overview of where we're going with this, some direction.
Kind of know what pieces you could, and I guess in conjunction with that, maybe if there's sort of a boiled down, here's what you gotta have, basics.
Yes,
Because
that's
then we can see if we've got some things that we really just don't need, and someone could find that information somewhere else. It may be helpful, but it's not really relevant, then we could move it out. But I think most of this has to be in there. It's just, we may want to emphasize now we may want to emphasize sections that before were one paragraph and now they're going to be their own chapter. So I think that could be the biggest change.
just as a thought off the top of my head, we may end up with a master plan document that says, here's 2 pages about the history and who we are. The next section of the master plan may be a whole section about public input. What do the people think about the community and what they're looking to maintain and achieve over the long term? Then the next section may be, how do we get there? What are the goals and objectives? And so on and so forth, as you move through a logical process, and all the other supporting information drops back into a reference in the back of the book, if you will. Yeah. So that may be a way to approach that. But if you don't know what all the sections are to begin with, that we're going to be covering as part of that gets included as part of a master plan, you don't know how to organize something that you don't know where you're going yet. So that's why I suggested I want to put together an outline of all the what I think to be the major sections of this master plan based on our discussions and my knowledge. And then we can improvise and move around or add to those kind of categories.
And that'll include the ones we've identified tonight that we would want to split out and potentially, or split and potentially create new chapters for.
Yes.
Dividing housing, urban development, or economic development.
Yes, I'll probably include that because we've had that discussion, but I'll generally just be working with major chapter titles.
Okay.
So
Does that
we'll figure it out.
make sense to the virtual members?
Yes, thank you.
That's a good approach.
Are we comfortable leaving off at that, or do we want to, we're getting close to the 2-hour mark.
Would you say public comments?
Yeah, and we would like to update any public comments from the telephone, from YouTube.
Any public comments on YouTube? Give you a few seconds. Just Jeffrey Ford saying yup so far. Don't see any.
And the real live public.
Sounds
Yeah,
very interesting. That's it.
yeah, I think that sounds like logical direction, but I do think it's important to have, the preface and then maybe the initial part of it, say, maybe the history and the geological features and what Harbor is, kind of that whole process, so give everybody a taste of it. And then, the population, the utilities, those services could be put back in appendices or whatever, because it's just basically, fact data, about what we have. And obviously, education is one of those good things. But to me, for the various readers we talked about, that you have, 3 different types of readers that might read this, isn't that the purpose of a table of contents? So if you want to find out a certain section, you go to the table of contents and say, oh, I want to find out about the population. I want to hear, read about economic development, So I don't think the layout is so important. I do think the introduction is important with the history and some of the geography, maybe not so much geology, topography, obviously the water, the effect of the water, the climate. Those are all things that you're going to want to have in that introduction area, of what and where and who Harbor Springs is. And then, like I said, table of contents is there for a reason. So if you want to look up what the housing situation is, boom. If you want to look up what is going on with the sewer system, boom. So that's about it, but it sounds like a sensible approach.
Thank you.
Nope.
We don't need any action other than you have your summaries that you're going to generate, and then I think a couple updates on the housing, you said some resources you could come up with for some sections in terms of the.
Yeah, when we get to the point where we start adjusting the details of those graphs and charts, we've got resources that we can reach out to. And if we have expanded areas that we want to try and add in, we can do that. And I think at the point where we start to get into revisions of the wording and the data, that would be the important part. We can just plug in those new areas that we want based on, when Larry puts together our new, chart of how we're going to arrange things and figure out where things go and what topics we're going to have. We can add that in.
And then I guess I would invite anybody in the public or on the planning commission to, like Mary Catherine, you said you had some suggestions on the semantics and language and things, and then also the section on senior accommodations. I guess, where would you want those forwarded, just so we're all clear and everybody on the meeting, on the call is clear? Where do you want them sent to Jeff? Or do you want them sent to Victor, both, or just so there's sort of a
It's like
general?
Jeff. And send them to Jeff, and you can CC me.
Send them to Larry.
And then we'll funnel them to Larry, and we'll talk about them. But, either or, really, Jeff or I, doesn't really matter. We'll get them. We
Just so
talk
there's
every
consistency,
hour.
so somebody's comments make
Yeah.
it into the next meeting. And I guess if that makes sense to everybody, we can move on to the next agenda item, which would be to set the date for the next master plan review meeting. Tentatively July 2nd, which is fantastic timing.
That's why I threw it. So we have our, if if I whip out the calendar here, hold on one second. If we wanted to have our July meeting the 2 weeks prior to our normal planning commission meeting, which is on July 16th, that would fall on the 2nd of July, and I didn't think that people were gonna wanna come in 2 days before the holiday. So that's why I threw in the other date, which would be then 2 weeks after the next planning commission meeting, or the July planning commission meeting, which would be the 30th. So those would be the 2 other Thursdays. There are, of course, July 9th or July 23rd, which would be the other 2 Thursdays in July, if one of those
And
is
just for
something.
clarification, what from the master plan will be on the agenda for the planning commission meeting following these special meetings? Is there gonna be a significant, or are we pretty much isolating the master plan discussions to these special meetings?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't, so if we had it on, I think it's too long to go from now to
30th.
the 30th. But I understand that July 2nd, even though it's gonna be abbreviated 4th of July, it might be a lot more family fun than coming downtown. So that could be difficult for a lot of people. Does anybody have an opinion about, I guess it wouldn't matter so much if we met 1 week before a regularly scheduled meeting, because it wouldn't put you guys in a bind for trying to prepare a bunch of things for the agenda for a week later. So I mean, I'm okay with the 9th, but we're open to suggestions, or it seems like if we did it on the very end of June, we're packing quite a bit into June. I don't know if that is the other option, to move it 2 days earlier, but the 9th seems to make sense, but
I just asked Jeff on YouTube, so
I'm good with July the 9th.
okay.
That'll give us enough time to get everything organized for the next meeting and have a good path set.
I mean, I have another event on July 9th. I have an event from 5 to 9. I'm actually okay with the 2nd, but I understand that it doesn't work for a lot of people given the holiday.
Jeff Ford says good on the 9th.
Lee, you still there?
I am, both days work for me, thanks.
Okay.
Jeannie?
Both days work for me as well. 9th is the 9th is probably easier, given
A
the
holiday.
craziness of the 4th.
Do we need to leave here with a date, or could we poll the others that
We-
aren't here and?
I think that's smart. Jeff Ford says 9th or the 2nd, so
We can definitely send out an email and get some of the other members' feedback before we set a date. If you want, you can just leave that for staff to send out an email and get further responses, and then we can set that date on either the 2nd or the 9th.
I just don't know. I haven't been told yet if I'm available on the 2nd, so I have to go home and find out, but,
Jeff Ford says he has no life.
that's true. Yes. I didn't have them before all this, and it's gotten pared down, so. I'm fine with, polling the other members who aren't here and seeing where we can get the majority. Right, so no action there. Member comments?